and welcome to Get the Table. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by the Dadley Boys of WhatCulture, Michael Hampler and Michael Sidgwick, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. And the issue today is the wrestlers who could be Saraya's major secret AEW partner. And before we get into who that could be, Sidge, why is this almost guaranteed to be a major secret partner?
The time and place of this, I feel, are incredibly significant. And can I just say as well that I wrote the article on which this podcast is based before Fightful Select broke the news, PW Insider, broke the news that the presumably former Sasha Banks may well be appearing at New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom. But my spidey senses tingled when I saw Kia Forum January 11th. This isn't something that's happening next week, which, for example, you could get anyone, basically, who you want to push and put them in the ring with the three biggest stars in the women's division in AEW. Kia Forum is in Los Angeles, California. And that is the place when they last held a taping there, that MJF cut the pipe bomb promo, but before which they were saying, look, we're getting the executives there. And we're really looking forward to their presence. And it was basically, the pressure was on to deliver an absolutely fantastic episode of Dynamite. And in fact, they did. But I feel like if any executive from Warner Brothers Discovery, and we are very, very close to the rights fee renegotiation process, is going to attend any Dynamite to get a real gauge of how hot this product is in the buildings, it's going to be on January 11th. And The timing as well, it's not just next week, it's a month from now. This is the longest amount of time I think they've teased any kind of big female wrestler, whether it's a debutante, a returnee, or someone from another promotion. There's plenty of time now to do what AEW loves to do. We saw it with the First Dance. We saw it with the teasing of the Exalted One. They love to drop red herrings. They love to do Easter eggs. They like to tease the hell out of it. This just feels like if they were ever going to bring in the biggest women's name in company history, this is the exact sort of means by which they would do that.
And the obvious place to start, as you alluded to, is the former Sasha Banks, potentially.
It just feels like it could be happening. It's closer than ever. If you look at the discourse and if you look at the various factors that have converged to arrive at what's barely a hot take as of overnight, it's in California. That's where Sasha Banks is from. It's a big pomp and circumstance deal a month in advance. As we discovered, they've never really gone to those lengths to really put something like this over. Sasha Banks and Saraya are really unfortunately linked in that they had what was then known as Saraya's last match. So there's something in the narrative linking them together. She's filed certain trademarks to register new ring names if she was going back to WWE. And, you know, she still might. She would be going back there as Sasha Banks and not like Mercedes Moné or whatever all the other ones are. And it just feels like a big event. And is there a bigger... We don't even know ultimately whether she's a free agent, but let's just say she is. There's absolutely not a bigger one in all of pro wrestling right now.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be sort of heading that way in terms of what Sid alluded to there, Hamlet, in terms of, I saw people suggesting the immediate aftermath of that story about her work in New Japan, that, well, you look at the calendar and you think maybe her deal with WWE runs out at the end of December. January frees her up for work in New Japan. No compete if a deal just runs out, of course, rather than her, being fired or asking for a release early or anything like that. And yeah, January 11th, tagging with Saraya against Britt Baker and Jamie Hayter could well be on the cards for Mercedes Varnado or whatever name she chooses to go by.
Yeah, I think even before the Wrestle Kingdom news or before the announcement of the Saraya needing a mystery partner thing came up, people were already at that point, because of things like the contract or indeed just fantasy booking after she wasn't at the Survivor Series, people were already looking for routes to her to make it into AEW anyway. I saw a little bit of speculation that maybe she was going to be Bow Wow's representative in the Jade Cargill story, because presumably it's not going to be Bow Wow versus Jade Cargill, so there's a woman at the end of that plot thread, and she was seen as somebody that, and that made sense in and of itself because Jade Cargill herself is a massive star, and that would be a big marquee match that AEW could promote. This one sort of feels even bigger in the context of the Wrestle Kingdom news. It's that momentum thing where she's going to put herself back in the conversation on the 4th of January to potentially wrestle on the 11th. It's striking while the iron is absolutely white hot. Now, of course, she could go back to WWE and you could have something very similar where she could work the Royal Rumble, and they're not that far apart either. So it's just January becomes her month. She's back in time for the Rumble. But yeah, with the news of the Britt Baker and Saraya tag match being announced, it does have a certain, I didn't even realise about the location until Sid mentioned it, but it does have something of an event about it, an event feel about it, because AEW wouldn't be, frankly, like promotionally stupid enough to promote something like that in advance without having a big payoff. They're not, it would be within the rights of the paying customer, the viewing public, if you bought a ticket or you've just watching the show, to be extremely critical of any booking where somebody is brought in and it isn't a major surprise, a returnee, a debutant, someone of that nature. So basically the person is the headline the next day. Whatever happens on that Dynamite, one of the headline stories will be who that person is. If it's not, and they've just pulled somebody out of the mid-card, or if you can even say that in the women's division, somebody that is just a regular on the roster, that's promotional malpractice because it buries that woman based on the like unrealistic expectations placed against them, which only strengthens the idea that it has to be somebody of a Sasha Banks level, or indeed some of the other people we're going to talk about, because I just don't think they'd harm somebody else on the roster with like so unnecessarily as well.
One more thing on Sasha before we move on to the other potential candidates here is that if you're an executive and you're attending AEW and you are deciding how much money to allocate it, if indeed there is going to be a new rights fee, okay, this could be a masterstroke on the part of Tony Khan, because if it is Sasha Banks, one of genuinely a handful of needle movers in WWE, if you look at her ratings record, she got one of the biggest ratings of the entire year in 2020, I think, when she
outrated the Demo God.
Yeah. And she had a match with Bayley. That was the most watched segment of all of either 2020 or 2021. I can't quite remember, but certainly it was absolutely enormous. I think it was 2020 in fact.
Thunderdome SmackDown
it
rematch
was,
after Hell in a
like
Cell.
after they were in trouble during the Performance Center era. Like she really helped bring WWE's ratings back to where they needed to be at that point. If you're an executive, and it's not just this one night pop, you've got a potential needle moving star here. How impressed are you going to be? Because there are going to be two absolutely deafening pops in one huge double pop. She's from California, so you get the hometown buzz. And can you think of a bigger shocker? It's up there in the top 5, if in fact it happens. An all-time AEW top 5 surprise pop.
But then again, we assume, if it is an ex-WWE talent making a jump to AEW, that it could be Sasha. There was someone else also there when they chucked their tag team belts at John Laurinaitis, of course, who we've seen actually hanging out with members of the AEW roster as well, and that's Naomi.
Yeah, it was Jade Cargill, wasn't it, she was seen with recently. It would be great, and it would go down extremely well with the live crowd for different reasons to the Sasha Banks one. And I think this is part of a bigger picture. It's not a problem with the situation Naomi finally finds herself in currently, but here we are. Talking about Sasha Banks as the headline of this podcast, and indeed like the headline name for this. Naomi's going to have to face a lot of that in the near future, and it's not really her fault. They left as a tag team and they left together, but it's what Sasha Banks does next has become the story.
Yes.
Which is natural. That's the reality of one star being bigger than another. I don't even think Naomi would argue that Sasha Banks is a bigger star than her, but she is absolutely a star within her own right. She has a fairly glittering reputation, actually, as somebody, again, you talk about who stands out and why in WWE that forever has been the brand rather than for the individuals. And she routinely got some of the biggest reactions on shows, despite going years without a story, without anything that could resemble a push, without a title reign. Like, we're going back to, I think it was 2018 that she had any kind of time at the top of the card fighting for the title when she lit up the belt and things like that. People still cling to that despite her going years and years and years before tagging with Sasha Banks. And even then, they protested, if you remember, because they were appalled with their own booking. So even when they won the belts, they were a makeshift team, and then they weren't being taken seriously after they won them. So she's kind of carried over a remarkable amount of fan support for somebody that wasn't that well nurtured by the promotion. They had this thing, and they did this with a lot of women in WWE, where when they were genuinely firing in that women's division, they had a lot of women that were all getting over at the same time. They got them all to a point, and then they just stopped caring about the lot of them. For years, WWE got away with pretty lazy booking in the women's division. Naomi was as guilty as anybody of that. And I just think if she came in now, nobody would remember say like the last 2 or 3 years of what she was doing in WWE, they would remember what they really loved about her when she got very, very over.
Yeah, we talk about needle movers, and obviously Sasha's more of an example here, but I still remember the buzz around that Royal Rumble when Naomi came in and WWE frittered it away.
Yeah, absolutely disgraceful. Like, absolute wild incompetence. They live their whole lives in WWE trying to aspire for mainstream coverage and like really getting back into that sphere. They had an opportunity and they failed themselves and Naomi dismally in that regard. One thing we should mention here, and this is more of a general point, is that it's kind of pie in the sky at this point to consider any major name. Does Tony Khan care enough about women's professional wrestling to roll out the red carpet to the extent that we are effectively fantasy booking here? That really is up for debate, and I don't think that's latent cynicism. I honestly think that is a genuine good faith projection based on how much of an afterthought this division continues to be. It's enjoyed a better last couple of months than it has in quite some time, but there's still only one match per show. Will that dissuade Sasha and Naomi from potentially coming in? Will they be made guarantees of no, we're really going to have to care if stars of your caliber come in? Jade Cargill on Twitter not too long ago wrote something to the effect of, or maybe it was a media interview, I know she definitely said it, but women don't get the opportunity to have 5-star matches here in AEW, even though we could. So she's been like very quietly negative about the way in which women's wrestling gets portrayed. So maybe that NBA game that she attended alongside Trinity Vatu, Naomi, right, could in fact dissuade her from joining All Elite Wrestling. I'll tell you one thing though, the complete opposite of that is that Tony Khan loves the W Fun Pop. He debuted Mr. Brody Lee and Matt Hardy on the same March 18 Dynamite of 2020. All Out 2021, he debuted Adam Cole and Bryan Danielson at the same time. What if...
Jeff Jarrett and Shibata.
I know you're taking the piss.
Double pop?
Double
pop Dynamite.
What if tag team match, right? And God bless her, she plays the role that she plays incredibly well, but it might not work in this context. What if Saraya and Mercedes Venado win? Because they would absolutely have to. What if Reba joins in a beatdown and then Naomi comes out?
Ooh. Great. Yeah.
They could do that.
Yeah.
They absolutely could do that. But, they're not necessarily a tandem package. Naomi could have complete aspirations of her own. But ultimately, Tony Khan would be kind of stupid if they're available not to sign both of them very, very quickly and at great expense.
Of course, it might not be someone from outside the company. It could be, Sige, a former world champion who could partner against the current world champion.
Hamflet made the exact same point independently of myself, I might add, in the article, which this is a transcript, but go and read it, whatculture.com/WWE. It would be so harsh on Toni Storm in particular if after all that time it was revealed to be Toni Storm, because you'd give her sort of the Sam Allardyce treatment. She's already received enough of it for me. She is kind of known as the safe pair of hands, the custodian of the women's division, the one you need to rely on when the real champion goes missing, for example. This woman is a star, and she's 27 years of age. She should not be stigmatized as oh, that's nice, but I was kind of expecting something a bit more. Like, I think that would be, as Hamflet says, promotional malpractice, like really harsh on Toni Storm, because look, we might be creating these expectations unique to ourselves in our own heads, but come on, the time, the place, this really feels bigger than the norm for the AEW women's division. And I would hate for Toni Storm, who already was cursed to sort of exist at the same time as the fans had chosen Jamie Hayter, I would hate for her to be further stigmatized as the safe pair of hands, the safe bet, when she could and should be a much bigger star in her own right. And independent of this discussion, I hope that's the case for her in 2023.
Yeah, and she should be completely justified in wanting to get revenge on Baker and Hayter, of course.
Yeah, it's not that the story isn't there. It's just this story isn't there. Here's your free ticket, or here's your guest pass to a surprise wrestler or something like that.
Like, she's already in a contract. Like, it makes no sense.
Toni Storm could have that match. Toni Storm is, like, especially within the context of the AEW women's division, is our wrestler of the year. Like, absolutely, she will be one of the wrestlers I remember when I think of 2022 for the run she had as interim women's champion. Like, on a similar vein, considering that the woman she was replacing, there is a Thunder Rosa return potentially, like on the cards. Like, we don't know for definite, but the relationship isn't completely broken. And she theoretically, in the story, should come back as a babyface and should be looking for revenge on, and has this long-standing legacy rivalry with Britt Baker, and should be looking for revenge on Jamie Hayter. It's all there, but she too, I think would be inadvertently cast in a nightmarish position as Saraya's mystery partner, because she's somebody that I think if you remember, and it wasn't very kind, but when Renee Paquette was sent out there to announce that Jamie Hayter was now the women's champion, there was a big pop went out. People weren't clamouring for Thunder Rosa to come back and have this title for title feud decided. So I think that would put her in even a worse position than Toni Storm. But narratively speaking, she's somebody that would make sense in the spot. It just reminds you that there is nobody on the roster, even your favourites, and there's plenty more, would really fit the spot. Not the way they've set it up.
It would be an execution of Thunder Rosa in particular, because if you look at the reception that Saraya herself got at Full Gear and ahead of it, the fans clearly consider Britt Baker to be the face and their favourite wrestler in that division. Everyone kind of knows the AEW audience is dialed in. This casual fan nonsense is a complete nonsense. They're dialed in. They know that real significant heat exists between Rosa and Baker. So if they give her the red carpet, babyface, partner treatment, it's an execution of her character if it's not already untenable right now as it is.
What about someone like Yuka Sakazaki?
Great. I feel like Sidgwick will be more expert to speak on like what she offers to the division as a whole. But I kind of find the same problem with her. Like, she is tremendous, independent of anything else. But I do think it scans. I dare say that might get one of those really awkward, polite cheers on the night, and they are just simply not booking this for a polite cheer.
Yeah.
It's what, early December as we record this. It's for January the 11th. Like, AEW simply do not put something in place for January 11th in early December to get a polite round of applause when a wrestler comes out. And that's not a dig at Yuka Sakazaki, nor is it a dig at a Riho, who typically gets an enormous pop, for example. There's lots of wrestlers that get lots of great reactions. Sakazaki is another one. But I just don't think that it's that specific kind of reaction that they'll be chasing with this device.
This would only work under the promise that Sakazaki is going to be around for a long time, whether she signs a deal or whether it's going to be a big, long, Takeshita-esque excursion exercise in that she gets over every single time. I remember the Baltimore Dynamite, the worst card, like, outside of the pandemic that they've ever put on. Like, all due respect to Deonna Purrazzo and Mercedes Martinez, who in their own right are both great professional wrestlers. That was as cold as ice. The show started with Jeff Hardy versus Bobby Fish, which was very, very slow indeed. And that crowd were in their right to be kind of pissed off, considering the standard of Dynamite elsewhere. Riho and Yuka Sakazaki worked Rampage and got them out of the mood, bang up for it, and got the loudest reaction on the show.
Riho's pops are always enormous, aren't they?
Yeah. I think Sakazaki in particular, they've always, from literally day one, Double or Nothing, gravitated towards Sakazaki. She's been a cult favourite, and she had wrestled prior to that episode of Rampage against Riho, like a calendar year before that, in a match with Penelope Ford on at Fyter Fest 2021. They remember her, they love her, because she's got this absolutely incredible sort of like deceitful speedster in-ring game, and it contrasts with that incredibly enchanting, wholesome look. She's just got the complete package of how to get over. So I do think if it's not a major, actual A-level, high-end WWE import, she stands a better chance than anyone of getting over. But I'm obviously very personally biased to Sakazaki. I think she's an incredible pro wrestler that probably speaks to my bias as much as anything else. I think there would be an air of disappointment if it is in fact her.
Finally, Sidge, as we wrap this up, I'm fairly confident in saying that we might not see CM Punk on AEW television anytime soon. That doesn't stop another member of the Punk household getting involved.
No, it doesn't. And I think there might be a temptation among some to say, well, she's married to CM Punk. Yeah, she's married to him. They're not the same person. She can have her own thoughts and ambitions completely outside of that marriage and join AEW irrespective of the sort of like appraisal she will have inevitably got at home. She's her own person. She could theoretically go into that organization and be a star. She hasn't wrestled for a long, long time. I don't think that's because she never liked it or anything like that. She was a super fan, and she was buried for this. She celebrated her first title win, and these arseholes buried her for it on commentary by getting a tattoo to mark it and celebrate it. She worked as hard as anyone to get there. She loved it as much as anyone. The problem, realistically, for me, is twofold. One, she had a really bad neck injury. It's kind of ironic, considering who she'd be partnering with, to say that that could prevent her from doing it. But, I just really can't see it on that basis. And, look, toxic male wrestling fans chanted CM Punk's name at her incessantly before they hated his guts, she would be completely well within her rights. Even if she'd healed and wanted to come back, can you imagine the reaction that she would be in for? It's utterly, wholly unfair, but it's not unrealistic to expect that exact scenario to play out.
It is fair, but selfishly, I would love to see AJ Lee back wrestling on a major wrestling show.
Yeah, for wrestling such a short time together, her and Paige had remarkable chemistry, even briefly as a tag team in WWE as well. I completely agree with the sentiment. There should be more of this discussion about how it's nothing to do with, especially because it always works the way of women and their husbands rather than husbands and their wives. It shouldn't be a reference as to who's married to who as to whether or not somebody works in a place. We should be long past that now, which is why I'll offer one last shout of Charlotte Flair, bringing her in. Also yet to return to WWE, get the PCB back together, whatever they were called. That was the second one, wasn't it? Because the submission sorority was ungoogleable. So
Yeah. What did it stand for? Just the letters
Paige,
of the
Charlotte,
women.
Becky, was it?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd love to see AJ Lee back, but it's a bit of a long shot.
Feels unlikely. She was last attached in wrestling to that. Was it like not a Glow, but a Women of Wrestling?
Women of Wrestling.
Come back, but even then that was just as like an authority figure. Yeah. So the fact that she wasn't announcing a soft launch to return to the ring there sort of gives you a clue that maybe taking bumps again.
She's got loads of projects. I think she's just written her first movie script, and that's on Netflix right now. So she's got...
Return to wrestling is always return to falling on your back for a living. It's not just a case of, I used to do that, I'll go back to doing that.
And she has way more income streams than, she basically does not need to do it.
Yeah. Exactly.
She's multi-talented.
Well, let us know your thoughts on the names we've suggested, or if you've got a pick of your own, let us know in the comments section below, or on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch so you can follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
M. Sidgwick.
Follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. As I said, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling wherever you get your podcasts from. But for now, this has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boys. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.